Okay, welcome everyone back to the Addiction Nutritionist podcast. I am super excited to have my really good friend on today. She's not only my good friend, she's like my go-to digestion guru. We talk probably almost every day. And she's the person that I ask all my digestion questions to. So I can't wait for you guys to hear all the wonderful things that we're going to talk about today in regards to digestion. And she's going to share her amazing wisdom with us. But before I introduce Karis officially, we're going to introduce our sponsor today, which is raspberries. I always ask my guests what their top 3 favorite foods are. And hopefully if we haven't discussed those foods yet before I pull one out to talk about. So when Karis shared that raspberries was one of her favorites, I got super excited because it's one of my favorites too. So I always love talking about foods that I love as well. So raspberries, I was doing a little bit of research on them. If you've ever had one, you know that they taste kind of sweet, but kind of tart. One of the things I discovered is that there are 4 different colors. I knew there were more than one, but I just never really gave it much thought. So there's black, red, purple, and gold. Karis, which one's your favorite?
I mean, I'm mostly by red just because that's usually what's available, but I have tried the black ones before and I've seen the gold ones. Not very often.
So I have to admit, I've seen the gold ones, but I haven't bought them because I thought something was wrong with them. So shame on me, a nutrition therapist, not knowing about the gold ones. So the gold ones, I was like, okay, what is this about? They are described as having a combination of flavors similar to a mixture of honey, apricot, banana, and raspberry. So I'm like, okay, I'm for sure going to try those next because that sounds amazing. But yeah, I mostly eat the red ones too. They're typically in season like June to October. One of the most amazing things about raspberries is that they're super low in sugar. So when we're talking about sugar, we're talking about naturally occurring fruit sugars, but that is something that you want to take into consideration. And I think maybe this might even come up today as we're talking about digestion, because some people don't do great with fruit. I'm one of those people. So there's only 5 grams per cup of raspberries. For comparison, bananas have about 14 grams for a medium-sized banana, and apples have about 19 grams of natural sugars per apple. So there's only 5 natural grams of sugar per 1 cup of raspberries. Part of that reason, they're really what you would call low glycemic. So they have a low, blood sugar impact, which is great for lots of reasons. We've talked about that in other episodes that might come back up again today. They're also really high in potassium. So again, I've talked about this when we talked about avocados in another episode. Bananas get all the hype for the potassium, and not to, call the doctors out, but they're like, oh, you need potassium, eat a banana. But there's so many other foods, including raspberries, that are great sources of potassium, which are really good for preventing things like heart attack and stroke, and managing your blood pressure. You always hear like low sodium. That's what you need to focus on when you need to lower your blood pressure. But increasing your potassium is just as important as lowering your sodium when we're talking about blood pressure. The next amazing thing is that just 1 cup of raspberries has 8 grams of fiber. So I think you'd have to be living on Mars by this point to not know that fiber in some way is really important for your diet. You see commercials about it all the time. Take your Metamucil, right? But Americans are so known for having these really low fiber diets. So it's not surprising when you see things like colon cancer rising for people in their 30s, So 8 grams of fiber per cup, which is actually more than most fruits. So that's one of the shining reasons why raspberries is outstanding for that. And just for the folks that are listening, if you're like, okay, I know I need to increase my fiber, it's typically at least 25 grams for ladies and 38 grams that we're talking about per day for men. But fiber is really important for helping to keep your cholesterol numbers under control, lowering your blood pressure, managing your blood sugar. There's only 6 net carbs in a cup of raspberries as well. So I don't necessarily think everybody needs to be on a low carb diet, but if you are on a low carb diet, you're experimenting with that, it is the right choice for a lot of people. 1 whole cup of raspberries is only 6 net carbs. They're chock full of vitamin C. Well, again, if we're bringing up the media, people are like, yeah, that's really important for your immune system, right? And I think maybe a lot of people know it's important for skin as well, because vitamin C is a component of collagen. It keeps so for me, like the former smoker, the lady who smoked for 20 years, that was like my biggest fear, right? Like I'm going to end up with the smoker's face. And if you are a smoker, you need more vitamin C than other folks for that reason. But I'm super focused on vitamin C now as one of my nutrients I try to get every day, because who doesn't, want that natural puckered up look. And then the other thing that I talk about this in groups a lot, vitamin C is critical for stress resilience. Your adrenals, the little glands that sit on top of your kidneys, use about 90% of the vitamin C that you consume. So if you're low in vitamin C, low stress resilience. What does low stress resilience look like? Very touchy personality, right? You say something to me or something happens, I'm having a long day at work, like, feels like the world's going to fall apart now, right? I'm going to keep going because there's just so many benefits here. Tons of antioxidants. I love talking about antioxidants. Somebody a long time ago, I have no idea who it was, so I don't know who to give credit to for this, but they described antioxidants as the like drunk rock star that's like going through the hotel with his guitar, like smashing everything in sight. That's what free radicals do in your body. These little unstable molecules. So they're like unstable musicians and rock stars just going through and destroying everything in their path, because they're trying to look for a way to stabilize themselves. From a biology perspective, it's because they're looking for an electron. But free radicals, happy little Mr. Raspberry comes in there and goes, oh, here you go. Here's some electrons for you, so you can be stabilized now. And then the rock star sits in his chair and all calms down, and he stops the hotel damage, which in your body is tissue damage. And so they're so important for that reason. We just live in a toxic world, the oxidative stress, we're breathing in pollution, all these different reasons why we're introducing free radicals into our body. So we need an abundance of antioxidants to offset that process. Side note, the black raspberries have the most out of the four. So good for you for eating your black raspberries. I like black raspberry ice cream. Does that count? And then if we're talking just about a couple extra minerals, it's got a lot of manganese in it, which is great for bones and skin, but also really important for blood sugar balance. Got some B vitamins and omega-3 in there. I would not have expected to hear about the omega-3. Did you know that raspberries have omega-3?
I'm not sure that I did know that.
I didn't either. I'm always like, okay, salmon, walnuts, if you're looking for a plant-based. But yeah, we could throw raspberries in the mix with there. And then the last thing I'll say about them is I always had like a big sweet tooth. Like sugar was a major issue for me for a long time. One of the things that I transitioned into was trying to find ways of getting things that were sweet that I could eat that were also healthy. And at some point I discovered getting a little bit of almond butter, adding a few raspberries to it, and just sprinkling in some Enjoy Life chocolate chips is the most like satisfying, delicious dessert ever. And it's totally good for you. And I think the biggest mistake that people make when they hear things like, oh, raspberries are good for me, is they go out and buy yogurt with raspberries mixed in, which is like double, triple the sugar. Just buy your own yogurt, low sugar, high protein yogurt, and add fresh raspberries, and you're doing yourself a favor.
Yes.
So that's my TED Talk on raspberries.
I love it. Who knew you could talk for 5 minutes about raspberries?
I know, right? What's your favorite way to enjoy them?
I'm pretty simple. I just eat them by themselves because I eat a pretty high protein breakfast. So one of my favorite things to do is just eat like a couple eggs with a couple, sausage links or turkey sausage or something, and then just have like a quarter cup or so of raspberries. And I mean, I don't do anything fancy with them.
No, I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have an opinion about frozen raspberries versus fresh?
I think that when I buy frozen fruit, I usually buy organic, which I usually buy organic raspberries too, because most berries are, conventional berries are sprayed with pesticides and herbicides. So it is good to pay a little bit more and get organic. And so the same holds for, if you're buying them from a place that has organic, then they're probably just flash freezing them. And most of the nutrients are likely preserved. I think you might lose a little bit, and I just don't think they taste quite as good. If you're putting them in a smoothie or putting them in something, that's fine. But I just really prefer the fresh ones. And even here in Colorado, we both live in Colorado, in the dead of winter, you can find raspberries. They're a little bit more expensive, but kind of a treat, I buy my little carton every week. And at Costco, they oftentimes have the double one. And so that if I see those that they have the organic double one, then I buy that and I get more.
Yeah. Heck
So-
yes. Yeah, I have similar philosophy. I mean, I think the frozen ones are great for smoothies and stuff like that. My understanding is that they're typically flash frozen, but they're picked at the height of ripeness, which usually means they have better nutrient content anyway. So I think it's so minimal, the difference between fresh and frozen. And if you're getting your raspberries in, you're doing something good for yourself.
Better to just eat them anyway. Like if you're not going to eat them, if you don't eat them frozen, then just eat them frozen, right?
Yeah, totally. I'm sure some people prefer it that way, like grapes. Some people love frozen grapes, regular as opposed to regular grapes. Okay, so let me formally introduce my guest today. Karis Setterberg has been a registered nurse for almost 20 years. She spent her nursing career taking care of patients with cancer. About 10 years ago, her own health was suffering and she couldn't get any answers or support from the traditional medical model. After being told there is nothing wrong with you, heard that before, a number of times she decided to take her health into her own hands. She enrolled in the Nutrition Therapy Institute for the education piece and quickly realized that she had to help others as she was able to help herself and her family. Karis starts with assessing her clients' digestion and nutritional status. Then we deep dive into each client's history and symptoms so that we can understand the picture of how the body is stressed. Karis designs personalized protocols for her clients to help get relief and allow their body to heal so that they can have great energy, sleep, and be free from symptoms that affect their well-being. So I didn't mention this, but Karis and I met through the Nutrition Therapy Institute. We're both nutrition therapists. We actually officially met, that's how we were connected, but we officially met at a speech that was being given by Dr. Fung. If you know who Dr. Fung is, he's like the intermittent fasting guy who talks about that. He wrote the book, The Obesity Code. And I don't even remember when that was, but it was years ago. And you have now become a treasured, precious friend to me in so many ways. But for the purpose of this conversation, you are the person I go to when I have a digestion question, hands down. So for people that are listening, when I say digestion or you say digestion, like all different kinds of things might come into their head. So I'd love for you to paint the picture for us, like, what does that mean? What are the parts of digestion? Like, what are we talking about here?
Sure. So I'll just add, can I just go back a little bit to my bio? Because one thing that I tell people too is that even when I kind of took control of my own health, I went and saw different functional medicine doctors. I mean, I was doing things a little bit differently, and they still weren't looking at digestion. And I wasn't really trained to look at it that way. I mean, we definitely learned about digestion, obviously, at NTI, but it wasn't really until I had a couple clients where I didn't start with digestion and they didn't really get the results that I was expecting, that I realized that this has to be something that I focus on. And I actually really enjoy it too, and teaching people about it. So really, I think of digestion, I mean, we know that digestion starts in the brain, but from a functional or mechanical standpoint, chemical standpoint, it's starting in the mouth with chewing. So the digestive process is from the mouth to the very other end, the poop, right?
Yep.
And so there's lots of different steps, obviously, in that process through your GI tract. And I will say that, the gut is much more known now. A lot of people know what gut health is. The term is thrown around all the time. And so it's definitely been good in some ways that it has helped people to realize that the gut or the digestive process is so fundamental for health. Like literally any health condition can be improved from digestive work. and gut health. But I think there's a lot of missing pieces, and I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So when you think about digestion, and I'll just really simplify this, but chewing sets up the stage for everything that happens in the stomach. And so if your food is not chewed properly, then you're getting food particles in your stomach that are just much bigger than your stomach can really handle. And your stomach does chemical and mechanical digestion. So people often hear about like the churn and burn, which is really like things moving around in there and that act of breaking things down. But also chemical digestion. And that's probably not more important, but equally as important. There's enzymes in your stomach that have to be activated. And that is in the presence of your stomach acid. And in our day and age, in our culture of popping acid reducing and acid blocking meds, most people don't have enough stomach acid. And honestly, that's even if chewing, like let's say people are constantly just inhaling their food, not sitting down to eat. If that step is missing and you have low stomach acid, that is going to deter the entire rest of the process through the digestive tract. Because that sets the stage for your stomach to empty. It sets the stage for absorption to happen in the small intestine, which is really where 90% of absorption happens. So when I say absorption, the process that our body is trying to go through in digestion is breaking down the macronutrients, right? So carbohydrates, proteins, and fats into their components so the body can use them. And really what I tell people is amino acids, which is what make up protein, fatty acids, which is what makes up fat, vitamins and minerals. Those are the things that must get absorbed in the small intestine. And if those foods are not broken down in the stomach, it's not going to set up the process for absorption to happen. Because as soon as that, well, it's not called food anymore, it's called chyme, but as soon as the chyme enters the small intestine, there's hormonal things that happen, there's digestive enzyme processes that happen, bile gets secreted in response to fat and protein a little bit too. None of that happens in the way that it should. And so the biggest thing that people don't understand, and you know this very well, Kelly, and you probably teach all of your people this, but the body runs on nutrients. Every single process in the body is nutrient dependent, like everything. So,
which is fascinating because what is the narrative? Macros.
Right.
Everything in the media is about your macros, but not the individual nutrients, which is what your body really runs on.
100%. So vitamins, minerals, fatty acids, amino acids, those are what make your body run. Some people would argue that carbohydrate, I mean, obviously fiber is important, but carbohydrate isn't really an essential, it doesn't have essential nutrients for the body. Right. But, I'm not victimizing carbohydrate, but really when you're looking at it simply, that's really the way that we think about it. And so if you're not extracting those nutrients from your food in the small intestine, your body cannot function optimally. And the body is really good at circumventing processes but as soon as it is suffering for a long time without the nutrients that it needs, the body starts to break down. And that's where we see symptoms. And as you know very well, it may not be the symptom of digestion, right?
Right.
People come to me all the time and they're like, I don't think I have a lot of digestive symptoms, but I've heard about you or I was referred to you, but I have anxiety or I have trouble sleeping or I have hormonal.
Or they're depressed, right? Like
that's just all related.
To make the connection for our listeners, if you've been listening to this podcast, the extreme importance we put on amino acids, which are the components of protein. If you are not absorbing those amino acids, like Karis is talking about, you do not have the raw materials to make serotonin and dopamine, right? I tell people this all the time. People don't think about their serotonin and dopamine. They think it's just like this thing that exists. It doesn't come down from the clouds and land in your head. It comes from your food. So if you're not absorbing those amino acids, you know, it can result in all of these different symptoms, but people just never think about, I'm depressed. How's my digestion? Right? They go, I'm depressed. Oh, I have a chemical imbalance, or like all these other things that they think about, or like, this is genetics. But that's, you know, something I want to continue to put out there in the world, is like, you have to ask yourself how well you're digesting this stuff. And I wanted to just touch base on something you said earlier. You said how it starts in the mouth. How many people do you know that are actually thinking about the chewing of their food? It's like the most simplest thing in the world, right? Do you ask your clients, hey, do you think about how many times you're chewing your food, or do you even think about that process? I'd love to hear about that.
Every time, because our society, we're just in kind of, not that we're in a fight or flight mode all the time, but people aren't thinking about eating. People are chugging a smoothie in the car on the way to work or on the way to dropping their kids off. They are, you know, hurrying up. I mean, I did this for a long time. And honestly, there are certain meals like breakfast for me that I still struggle with this a little bit. Standing in the kitchen, eating, you know, in front of your computer, in front of the TV. And people often ask me, like, why is it a problem to be like doing something else while you're eating? And I think it's just because you don't have the awareness of if you're even chewing your food or not. And I would say 99% of people don't chew their food. They really don't chew it. I mean, they definitely don't chew it optimally. And so I always start with this with my clients, and I help them we always start with, where are you at? Because I'm not going to tell someone to chew their food 30 times per bite.
Because they're going to be like, gross.
3 times per bite, right? Like that's not going to happen. So we start with, where are you at? And I have them do a little assessment of what they think, you know, how they're doing. And then we go from there, because really this is a very individual process. And if you can make a difference in what you're doing, that's what really matters. And really at the, you know, the process is sympathetic state versus parasympathetic state. And I know you know what that means, but sympathetic state is like, oh, I got the meeting in 20 minutes. I got to hurry up and eat. You know, are you thinking about these other things, or I'm driving? That's sympathetic. Parasympathetic is relaxing, slowing down, digesting. And digestion can't really occur in a sympathetic state.
That's right. And, you know, I heard you say that people aren't in fight or flight all the time. But I got to tell you, I think people really are in a low level sympathetic state most of the time. Right. And tell me exactly what's happening with the hydrochloric acid, the stomach acid, and the pancreatic enzymes when you're in that sympathetic state.
Right. So the body, so if you think about the sympathetic state on a continuum, and the far side is being chased by the lion. Okay. So you're being chased by the lion and you're munching on a energy bar or something. Like your body is like, I don't care about the energy bar. We're running from the lion. This is like a life-threatening situation. So even if people, and I agree with you 100%, are not quite there, they're not being chased by the lion, but they're still in kind of that rush, go mentality. Your body is still primed to not digest food. Like those things, I mean, the acid is, if you have appropriate acid, it's there in your stomach. But the presence of the acid and the presence of the food coming in from chewing signals your body to secrete enzymes to start breaking down that food in a chemical way. So let's say you just inhale a cup, you know, like, I don't know, a bowl of oatmeal in like 2 minutes, okay? And you're not really chewing it, it's just going down really quick. Your body's like, what the heck? Often hits the stomach like that, right? And the body is like, oh, we got to hurry up and like secrete these enzymes. And even if you have appropriate stomach acid, it's kind of like a being, you know, it would be, I'm trying to think of a good analogy. Like, let's say you're like part of a musical group or something, and you're like the backup musician. And then all of a sudden they're like, you're going on stage right now, you know, and you're like, So the body is kind of freaks out, it doesn't know what to do. So those enzymes aren't optimally secreted is the big message here. And
Mhm.
so then that food is not going to be broken down. I know we're going to talk about poop, but people ask me all the time, like, how do I even know if I'm breaking down my food? And there's so many different clues, but one of them is, do you see food in your poop?
Mhm.
I'm not talking corn here, but like,
Right.
do you see undigested food in your poop or in the toilet, in the
Yeah.
water? And if you do, that's a huge signal
Mhm.
that you're not digesting food.
Yeah.
If your poop is really, really smelly, and this is gross, but this is all the things that we talk about.
Yeah.
Or if you have really smelly gas, that's a clue that your body is trying to digest undigested protein once it
Mhm.
gets to the large intestine.
It's like
And we
fermenting in
don't
your
want
gut.
that. Exactly. And so, the slowing down process, what I do with people, like I'll give you an example. I have a mom, a client that's a mom that has like a 3 school drop off. Okay. It's a busy morning. She really just wants to drink her smoothie. So I'm like, well, when is the smoothie usually gone? She's like, by the first school, I'm like, okay, let's slow it down and have you finishing the smoothie by the time you pull back into the house. And
Mhm.
she was able to do that over the course of a week, 5 days.
Mhm.
And she noticed a huge difference in just how she felt when she got home. So normally
Mm.
when she got home, she felt like she had to go to the bathroom pretty
Yep.
quickly because things are going
She
through quick, right?
shocked the stomach.
Yeah. And she didn't feel like bloated and just like an indigestion kind of feeling. And her body was able to respond to that coming in more slowly.
Mhm.
And it made a world of difference for her. So that's just one example. I think you have to do this at your pace. You really
Mhm.
do.
Mhm.
But awareness is the first step.
Totally. It totally is. Because if you're just sitting there, like watching the 24-hour news cycle while you're eating your dinner, it's like breaking news, and you're not thinking about your chewing, you're not thinking about your swallowing. So many of those are just involuntary automatic reactions. But like you said, you have such a golden opportunity to set yourself up for success by bringing some of that awareness in. I tell people, smell your food. Get
Yeah.
involved in the experience of consuming the food. What does it look like? What are the tastes, the textures? What's the mouth feel? Because when you're doing that, you're sending signals to the body that this is a safe place for this food. It's coming in. It's been notified. When you just smell it, you trigger that digestive process and the body's like, okay, guys, line them up. Like you were saying with the musician, like people are like looking for their places, standing on stage, and they're ready and waiting and willing for that food to come in. And we will talk more about poop later, but I definitely would say, can we normalize looking at your poop? Can we make that normal? I tell people all the time, it's free and it's your daily health report card. If you just look in the toilet and
Yeah.
we'll talk later about all the things you can look for. But that's the easiest way for you to be your own doctor, in that sense of just getting a hold of where's my digestion at. Can you tell me a little bit about what specifically causes bloating?
Oh, that's a great question. So I like to think about bloating as upper bloating or lower bloating.
Oh.
So bloating I generally think of as related to gas. So if you have upper bloating, which is usually in your stomach, that is because generally you don't have enough stomach acid. And the key so you have it's called a sphincter or like a trap door, right? One from the bottom of your esophagus at the top of your stomach, and then you have another one at the bottom of your stomach and the beginning of your small intestine, and that's the pyloric sphincter. So in order for that to open, the chyme, which is your partially digested food, needs to be of a proper acidity. That's like the key to open the pyloric sphincter and for the food to transition out of the stomach into the small intestine. And if that doesn't happen, the food sits in your stomach. So a lot of times people will say they just feel full for long periods of time. They might have bloating, and that's kind of why I tease it out if it's upper bloating or lower bloating. And a lot of times people, if it sits in there long enough, the body is trying to digest it still, and it can produce gas. And gas can put pressure on that upper sphincter, and it doesn't necessarily always open. I know there's a lot of conversation about like, oh, acid or things are getting back up into the esophagus. And that's not the case for most people. I think it's more of a pressure thing. And that pressure is that bloating. And definitely food intolerances or sensitivities can contribute to that. If you put a food in your system that your body is like, heck no, like this is not good for me right now for whatever reason, that can definitely cause bloating, because sometimes if we do testing or we just remove things through elimination, people can get like pretty quick results from that. You know, like I know you know about people like eliminating dairy or coffee or acidic food. I mean, just in an attempt to feel better, they'll notice that a lot of times that will go away. And the message there isn't that those foods are not something you don't have to, or you have to avoid for the rest of your life. It's really just a time where there's stress in the GI tract and your digestion isn't functioning as it should. So we need to restore that, reduce the stress, allow the body to heal as it knows what to do, and then we can retry it later.
So when you're talking about upper bloating, that's more relation to the stomach. And when you're talking about lower bloating, is that the small intestine?
Yeah, so lower bloating can be small intestine, it can be large intestine. You know, if you have bacterial overgrowth and you have normal bacteria in your small intestine and a lot of normal bacteria in your large intestine. But when things get overgrown or imbalanced, if you have fungal overgrowth, you can start your food, those bacteria will start to try and ferment food in the wrong place, which is the small intestine. Or if it's food that's not appropriately digested and it's in the large intestine, which is lower down. Although for some people, because of the way your anatomy is, it doesn't feel super low. Because as you know, like the large intestine goes like this, right? And the small intestine is all on the inside and it's kind of like this. It's just all folded on top of each other. So, you know, I can never say like, oh, that's your small intestine or, oh, that's your large intestine when someone's like painting. But the point is that the process of what the body is trying to do, the food is not in the optimal state. And so if you have bacterial overgrowth in the small intestine, you're going to get a lot of gas. And people try, your body's trying to process things. And
so people understand it's the bacteria that's producing the gas.
Exactly. So it's producing gas, and that's how you test for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth.
Otherwise known as SIBO.
SIBO, right. You do that test and the gas test, and then that tells you. But
so if you're looking at somebody and a lot of their symptoms is more belching, are you looking at that as upper bloating versus gas, lower bloating? Or
belching is definitely a stomach issue.
Yeah.
The food is sitting in the stomach. It's not going through. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And people can have a little bit of belching with the hiatal hernia. I have like a pretty much resolved hiatal hernia, but it's still there. I think I probably got it when I was pregnant for 2 years in a row.
Right.
And so, but again, the body, if you take care of your body and like try and, give it the environment that it needs, the body knows how to heal, right? Like sometimes we have to support it, but the body is amazing. And the GI tract turns over pretty quick, those cells.
Within days, right?
That's the thing with just real quick with cancer patients, like chemo is known for disrupting all your rapidly renewing cells in your body. So your bone marrow, your skin, your hair, and your GI tract. So symptom-wise, that's what we see. People lose their hair, they get rashes and weird skin things, they get mouth sores, they get nausea, they get diarrhea, and their counts go down, their blood count.
So chemo stalls out what would be a normally rapid rate of cell turnover. Is my understanding?
No, it's killing rapidly growing cells. So
and it's not discriminating between. No. That's really interesting. Okay.
So that's, it's killing your cancer, but it's also killing you, your rapidly renewing cells. So those are the symptoms we see. And so it's amazing how quickly, like as soon as that chemo half-life and the kill period is over, like things, people might have like a week where they feel really bad, and then like all of a sudden, like the body just repairs itself.
Oh,
Right.
I love that. Oh my God. I see that. So just kind of unrelated, but I don't know why I was thinking about this morning when you quit smoking, like literally when you miss that first cigarette that your body is used to getting. So it's your morning cigarette, it's your after lunch cigarette, whatever it is. As soon as you miss that opportunity, the body like immediately perks up and goes, are we doing this? Are we quitting? And it goes into like rapid healing mode, which is just so fascinating to me. The body is designed not only to heal itself, but to like have that internal desire to, instantly start that repair work. I want to go back real quick to the lower esophageal sphincter, just because there's so much misinformation out there about it always being too much stomach acid. And so I'm just interested if you wouldn't mind touching on the signaling that's going on to that lower esophageal. Like I originally thought it was like a flap, and then I realized it's actually like a sphincter. And I thought it was like a can that had like a flap that opened. But then when I started learning more about that, it's actually like relaxing and contracting. But that motion of the relaxing and contracting has a very well-connected relationship to the stomach acid, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Really? So the thing is that, the development of acid reducing and eliminating, like to really shut down your body's production of acid, those drugs tended to cause relief in some people because they might have a leaky LES, or lower esophageal sphincter. But I would say, I talk to a lot of people, even people who don't work with me, and they have like heartburnish type of feelings, but they have normal EGDs or endoscopes where the doctor puts the camera down and looks at their anatomy and all the function of everything. And there's nothing found. That was my situation too.
Are they looking at stomach acid level during those
No,
tests?
they don't normally look at stomach acid level. What I mean is that there's nothing wrong with the sphincter. The
Nothing
sphincter is
functionally
tight.
wrong.
The sphincter is working as it should. And so the whole stomach acid thing is, if your stomach is producing gas, remember we were talking about before, if you had the food that's sitting in the stomach and the acid is low, so the pH is high, then the food is just going to sit there. It's not going to get into the small intestine. That produces gas. And if there is any sort of acid in there, which I would say, the acid is not like all or nothing, it's just too little for most people. And so if there is any sort of acid in there and it produces gas, that's going to feel like the heartburn feeling. That's going to feel like that kind of symptom, even if it's not getting up into the lower part of the esophagus, right? It's not necessarily getting there. And I've definitely heard several doctors say that, like, if you actually got acid in your esophagus, it would burn a hole through your esophagus.
So caustic, right?
Right. And so because the stomach has this wonderful mucosal lining that soothes it. It's kind of like bathed in this like glossy, thick membrane. And that's what protects the stomach from the acid. The rest of the body doesn't have
what's
that.
The connection to esophageal cancer and reflux? Is that?
Yeah. So,
Is there?
Sometimes, like,
okay,
there's a thing that's called Barrett's esophagus,
yeah,
which is
I'm familiar.
kind of, you will know what that is, but
A narrowing of the esophagus,
yeah.
right?
And the thing is if you have some sort of insult, like let's say someone is taking a lot of NSAIDs or like Aleve, Advil, things like that, that is known to cause a disruption in the mucosal layer of the stomach. That is also known to disrupt the hydrochloric acid production in your stomach. And so what happens is when you have low stomach acid is there's a bacteria called H. pylori that can grow in the stomach. And H. pylori, they're estimating like 80% of the world has it present in your stomach.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of people kind of think about it that it's just like normal flora, it's in there, and it doesn't really cause a lot of problems unless your stomach acid is low and the H. pylori can grow out of control. And it can also cause ulcers in your stomach. So if you get an ulcer from any sort of cause on the stomach wall, that is irritation, inflammation to that part of your body, right? And so anytime that there's like a disruption in tissue is a chance for anything to form, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the in the literature, the connection is that there's gastritis or there's an ulcer. Gastritis is just inflammation of the wall of the stomach, or there's an ulcer, and that is a potential place for a stomach cancer to start, or esophageal cancer. I don't know that there's like a connection with GERD. There might be. But again, if it really was acid burning the esophagus, it would be a much more pronounced. I'm not sure that anyone has really ever found that actually is happening.
Oh, I had a client who had,
unless you have a leaky LES.
Yeah.
If you have a mechanical problem
Yeah.
of your lower, then it will be seen on endoscopy.
Yes.
You will have erosion of the esophagus.
Yeah.
And that's obviously a problem. So that LES is not protecting the esophagus, but that is not very common. Like what people are afraid of and worried about is that, but that's not what we see. Because if that was the case, then what I do would not help anyone.
Right.
Like what happens oftentimes is people go to their doctor, they have heartburn. The doctor puts them on a PPI, an acid reduce blocking drug, basically.
Like Nexium or Prilosec.
It doesn't do anything. They don't get any relief from that drug because acid is not their problem.
Right.
And so, but most people are in that camp.
Mm-hmm.
Like your client, there are people, there's no question. I've taken care of patients too who have had like lower LES issues.
Yeah.
But that's not the majority of people.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. She had pictures. It was completely eroded and destroyed. It was crazy. But a lot of folks don't know that your stomach acid is one of your primary defenses against things like food poisoning, right? So I always, when somebody's like, I went to this place and I had a salad and I got food poison, they often will think of it as like, this place didn't wash their stuff and it poisoned me. But if you are a human being eating salad, fruits, vegetables, or whatever, you are very likely getting exposed to like small amounts of E. coli and all these other bacteria all the time. And your stomach acid is your defense against that. So if you have sufficient stomach acid, it kills off that bacteria and doesn't make you sick. So that's one of the first things I look at when somebody's like, I've got food poisoning, it's like, let's look at the sufficiency of your stomach acid because your defenses may have been down. You and I may have been eating the same salad and been exposed to the same levels of bacteria. That's not always the case, right? Like it could have been like a massive amount of bacteria, but it might also not have been. And it was just that you weren't able to kill it off.
100%. And people also in that same thought pattern don't think that every time that they're exposed to that they're going to get sick, right? So let's say you don't have enough stomach acid and you're ingesting like small amounts of bacteria or any sort of toxins in through your food or somehow through drinking or whatever, that those toxins are getting introduced to the rest of your body. Like they're just in your body now. It didn't, and it got through the stomach. They might not be making you sick, like food poisoning sick, like we think of vomiting and diarrhea. There's all kinds of things that can happen inside your body when those toxins are in there.
So we were just discussing a study that came out about what it was, bacteria translocating from different parts of the GI tract that it wasn't supposed to be in, and this possible connection to autoimmune disorder. So bacteria not in the place that it's supposed to be can cause so many issues.
Definitely.
so much good stuff about, digestion. I feel like we've given a really good overview of what it actually means. And we only really kind of briefly touched on, why should we care about this? And I think I think a lot of people have the mentality of like bloating, gas, indigestion. This is just normal, right? This is the normal American way. But if you've ever had a period of time where you experienced those things and had a period of time where you didn't, man, your life quality is so much better when you can just go eat food and not have to think about it, right? The people who have really intense digestive symptoms, who are now usually hiring somebody like you or somebody else and looking for testing and am I eating foods that are bothering me, are usually at that point where it's interrupting their life so much. So it's easy to be like, well, you want healthy digestion because you don't want symptoms of indigestion and whatever. But I mean, for the mental health piece of it, we kind of just touched on it. Especially in the small intestine, if you are not breaking your food down properly by using all of these mechanisms that we've discussed, you are really putting at yourself in a place not only where you might not be getting enough amino acids to make your serotonin and dopamine, but you could slowly be building up very critical nutrient deficiencies, which could lead to very intense chronic illness or even potentially cancer. And so I want to just touch on that for a minute, because people will often say, I had a physical and there was a nutrient panel in there and the doctor says I'm fine, I don't have nutrient deficiencies. So I am a little curious about the difference, in your opinion, about technical nutrient deficiencies versus optimal nutrient intake, assimilation, and absorption, and kind of what the difference is between those.
Yeah, that's a great question. And also just to speak to what you were saying a little earlier, and I think that that's the key, is when people have had these symptoms for so long, they don't even know what it feels like to not have them.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as they don't have them anymore, they're like, I feel amazing. I cannot believe I lived that long. So,
Right.
The message and like, why should we care about this? And I kind of touched on this a little bit in the beginning, is that digestion is literally fundamental to every part of your body, to your entire health. And you can, like I had a low hormone level, so I wasn't sleeping very well, I wasn't digesting my food, I had all these digestive symptoms, and the functional doctor gave me progesterone to like help my progesterone level. Did that do anything for anything else? No, it did not. And so I didn't get better for 90% of what was going on with me. That's just a perfect example. Is like, we have to get to the root cause of what is causing the problem. And I would bet a lot of money that bring me anyone with any sort of health condition that can be improved through their digestion.
Amen.
And like the digestive process. So, you asked the question about nutrient assessment. So this is like the $1 million question, right? And I would say, even just in the time that we've been in practice or have started school and now in practice, that there are so many tests and ways to look at nutrients out there. But in the conventional model, most doctors don't really look at many nutrients, they are not, and this is nothing against doctors,
right,
because doctors are amazing humans and they are doing what they're trained to do.
Totally.
And what they're trained to do, they get like a half an hour lecture on nutrition in medical school, and they're not trained that nutrients are what make the body go round.
Right. Karis is married to a doctor, so she has firsthand knowledge of this, right?
Exactly. Well, I actually went and talked, I did it on Zoom, but I talked to a group of residents, which are doctors in training, about nutrition, and their minds were like blown. So first of all, it was so cool that they were receptive to me coming in and chatting with them. But I taught them basically that nutrients make the world go round and make your body function, right? And they're just like, how come we don't know this? So the medical model really needs to catch up. And it's happening. I mean, there's definitely things happening, but so doctors, if let's say, I would say things like iron, B12, Things like that. Docs are usually pretty good at kind of assessing, but they don't think about it in relationship to digestion. I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but
No, it's
also
good.
the body keeps your blood at the levels that it wants. Really, it's very tightly controlled. So let's say, and this is just an example, this doesn't really happen, but like, let's say someone wondered if they had osteoporosis and they're like, well, let's check the calcium and the vitamin D and your blood, because that's what helps build bone, right? You're not going to get any answers to that. And that is true for most blood tests that involve nutrients.
Mm-hmm.
But, if you check a random nutrient level, like a B6 or something, on most people, it's going to be normal levels because your body keeps everything very tightly controlled. There are so many great ways to assess nutrient status now. And I would say that it's very much a moving target. It's changing constantly because you're obviously intaking food and nutrients constantly. The body is constantly trying to do the job that it knows how to do. And so, I think one of the downfalls of testing, and what people always say is like, well, I'm going to do my test today, and is that going to be accurate 3 months from now? It's not really that it's not going to be accurate. It's just going to be, we have to start somewhere, and we have to know kind of where to start. And so testing is definitely useful. There's urine testing is probably one of the better ways to look at nutrients. Bioenergetic testing is coming more to the forefront. They've been using it around the world for years and years and years.
Yeah.
Muscle
Paris
testing,
and I both offer bioenergetic testing.
Muscle testing. A lot of practitioners trained in that do a great job at assessing nutrient deficiencies. I actually have a great questionnaire that I use called the NutriQ. And it was developed by someone, a woman who's married to like a computer person. And so they developed this, and she was a nutritionist.
I use the NutriQ too. That is such an amazing.
That's right. I forgot you did.
Yeah, that's an amazing.
Such a great tool. And I think the big thing there is, in most cases, someone saying, I have a lot of signs of magnesium deficiency, I am going to try taking some magnesium for a month. That's usually what I recommend. I know that's pretty much how you operate too. Like, this is not necessarily the rest of your life. You might feel better supplementing with Meg for the rest of your life. But for now, we're going to try a month or two, and then we're going to see how you feel. Do you notice a difference in those? And there's a lot of great tests too that will show you, like, you are low in magnesium, or you are low in B12 or something like that.
Yeah. And I want to offer another example, because we're talking about digestion, but it's so intermingled with nutrient absorption and utilization, like just zinc, right? If you have impaired digestion, so let's just assume somebody is taking enough of zinc in their diet, but their digestion is impaired and they're not absorbing that zinc, that reinforces the digestive dysfunction, right? Can you speak to that?
100%. It's just like a vicious cycle, because you aren't absorbing the nutrients that you need to make your body run and to make the hormones and the enzymes that you need to digest your food.
Because you need zinc to even create enough hydrochloric acid.
Exactly. And so if you're not, let's say you eat plenty of animal products that have zinc in them, like they're very high in zinc, but you're not breaking down the amino acids, and the minerals are slipping through the cracks and they're not getting absorbed in the small intestine, or you have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth and things can't get absorbed in the small intestine, then that zinc is going right through you, basically. And so then people are always asking, like, well, then why would I supplement with zinc on top of that? And the reason for that is because if you're taking a high quality supplement that is formulated in a way that it gets absorbed very quickly, then you're not relying on a digestive enzyme or process to break down food to get that mineral out. So that just gets absorbed literally in your stomach and goes right to your bloodstream.
No, that's such a
And
good point to bring up.
And then that zinc goes where it needs to go, right? The body
Mhm.
knows. It's like the traffic director. It's like, you go
Yes.
here, you go there, whatever.
Yeah, I tell people it's like a conveyor belt. Like you send the
Yeah.
food in and it goes by on the conveyor belt and the body's like reaching, oh, like I see some vitamin A. I need that for the eyes, you know?
Yeah, and maybe a couple fights here or there, like,
Yeah.
no, I really need it more than that, you know? Like,
Totally.
yeah. And so, you know, the thing is when we were talking about supplements, is that, and I know you know this, but like there's a lot of really crappy supplements out there in the
Mhm.
wrong form. That's the other thing, is that for, you know, there are so many different forms of magnesium. And so you really have to know what you're doing to get the right amount. Sure, you can go to the store and buy it, but it may not give you the results that you're getting.
It might make it
You're
worse.
looking for. It
Mhm.
could make it worse, and you might be getting a lot of other crap in the supplement that they
Mhm.
use fillers and things like that. So that's why it's good to look for higher quality, you know, supplements from companies that are known for not filling it with a bunch of
Right.
fillers.
I would agree with that. I want to go back to something you just said a few minutes ago about food slipping through. And I'm curious about the connection between food sensitivities, leaky gut, you know, food particles getting into the bloodstream. There's so much controversy about that. So we don't have to get in the weeds about it, but you'll all you got to do is spend a small amount of time on the online forums and people will be like, food sensitivities don't exist. You know, you either have an allergy or you don't, but there's such a wide spectrum of sensitivities. That was a big part of my own personal healing journey. So can you talk a little bit about that, how food particles from the stomach are getting through the cracks of the mucosal layer and the GI and slipping into the blood and that sort of thing?
Sure. So just to recap about the whole food sensitivity thing really quick. So there's food allergies, food sensitivities, and food intolerances. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So a food intolerance is when you don't have enough of an enzyme to like break down a food. And the classic example of that is dairy. So you need lactase, which is the enzyme to break down dairy. A lot of people don't have enough lactase, so they're intolerant to dairy.
Because like 40%, isn't it?
It is. And so the best way to test that is you drink some milk, you take a Lactaid, which has lactase in it, and you're like, I feel fine.
There you go.
Okay. So that's a food intolerance. A food allergy is Kelly eats a peanut or a couple peanuts after one time, right? Subsequent times. And the immune system has many different parts of it. But the IgE response is the part of your immune system that is the allergenic part. And your throat closes up and you can't breathe and you're going to die if you don't have an EpiPen, right? Mm-hmm. That is a food allergy. That is not what we're talking about.
But it doesn't does it always end that way?
No, it can be like not as serious. It can be a lesser progression, definitely. So I had a client who this is just classic. So she had been to the doctor, all kinds of different doctors, seen an allergist. She literally, every single time she ate, she got hives. It didn't matter what it was. Sometimes it was a little, sometimes it was a lot, for months and months and months, and no one could figure it out. So I ran food sensitivity testing on her. She didn't really have like a lot of digestive symptoms. She had like a little bit of heartburn. And then we did a thorough assessment, like everything else I do, look at her digestion. She had a lot of food sensitivities. And so normally when I see that, I think of leaky gut, and we can talk about that in a minute. But food sensitivities to me are, and the key is that not every person has the same response to a food sensitivity. So in her case, she had hives all over her body. That's pretty extreme. Mm-hmm. Most people get digestive symptoms. They might have diarrhea. They might just not feel good. Their energy is terrible. And so it just, for some reason, that food protein is causing stress in the GI tract. And so it could be lots of different reasons. But when you have leaky gut, that's kind of a separate thing. You know, some people think of food sensitivities cause leaky gut, and some people think of leaky gut is a result or food sensitivities are a
Mhm.
result of leaky gut, right? Like, and really what leaky gut is your in your intestinal walls, your cells are one cell layer thick, and that's it. And so if there's any separation in the space between those cells, that's what leaky gut is. So anything that's in your GI tract can get into your
Mhm.
bloodstream. And
Bacteria, food particles.
anything. And the food and the small intestine has an amazing blood supply because it's trying to bring nutrients in and pull nutrients out, right? Because absorption is the whole point in the small intestine. So if you have food particles in your bloodstream, that is like your immune system's like, what the heck?
Mm-hmm.
This is a problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they know that there's a connection with autoimmunity and leaky gut. I mean, it's probably something that's been going on for long periods of time. And there's certain things that can break down your cell lining. Glyphosate is a perfect example.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up.
Foods that are treated with glyphosate, you ingest that glyphosate with the food and it destroys your gut lining.
Like oatmeal.
Yeah.
I have to say that because gosh, people love their oatmeal and they see the heart healthy check mark. I hear this all the time. They're like, I eat oatmeal because I have high cholesterol. It has the heart healthy check mark, and they'll eat tons of oatmeal.
Oats are heavily treated with glyphosate unless they're organic. If they're organic,
right. Yeah. And I'm not vilifying oatmeal as a food. It's just that it has the potential to be exposing you to a lot of glyphosate, which can exacerbate that issue for sure.
100%. So there's all kinds of different insults. And so then the body is working really, really hard to repair and to get those cells back together. And there's different things like cholecystokinin is a hormone in your small intestine that helps maintain the integrity of those. L-glutamine, as you know, is like an amino acid that works very intimately within the lining of the small intestine, large intestine. So, I think I like to think of everything, because the question I get the most probably from people like this is like, why did I all of a sudden I can't eat tomatoes, or I can't eat oatmeal, or I can't eat whatever, like, and it's the kind of back to what we were talking about before. This doesn't happen overnight. This is happening over long periods of time. And eventually the body just breaks down to a point where it's like, I can't compensate for this anymore. Here's the sign, And, we both have autoimmune disease. And when you have autoimmune disease, there was a time and a place where you had the setup for the autoimmunity, the stressor that triggered and kind of brought all those symptoms to the forefront, right? And then your immune system is like, what the heck? Totally over exaggerating and attacking you.
And we're using the term leaky gut, which is thrown around a lot in the media. And that term alone, I think, has a lot of controversy. And so I just like to remind people too that you'll see it in the forums, and there's doctors out there that will say leaky gut doesn't exist. The medical term for it is intestinal hyperpermeability. So, if you go to like PubMed or Google Scholar, where you're looking for studies and evidence of this, and you type in leaky gut, you may or may not find anything. But if you use the keyword intestinal hyperpermeability, you will find it a lot. And so I think it's just a little bit of a matter of education too, having these types of discussions, because it's easy for somebody to go, oh, my doctor said leaky gut doesn't exist. But it's just, they're just not understanding what that means or what that is. So we've talked a ton about the stomach and the small intestine. So let's move down the pipeline and do a little bit deeper of a conversation about poop. Like I said, we need to normalize looking at your poop and talking about poop, because there are a lot of folks out there, they can't afford a functional medical nutritionist, or they can't afford to see a nutrition therapist or whatever. But if you're looking in, and we're going to talk about a tool that you have that's really cool, and that I will put a link to in the show notes in the discussion piece underneath wherever you're watching this or listening to this. But poop is your daily health report card, and it is free, and you can gather so much information by looking at that. We talked earlier about seeing undigested food particles, which again, if you ate a piece of corn or a sesame seed, it wouldn't apply to that because those foods are actually used to track things like transit time.
Yeah.
Which should really be about 18 to 24 hours, which means that if you eat a meal, you should be pooping that meal out somewhere between 18 and 24 hours later. But there's so many things you can gather from looking at your poop. What is the color, right? Is it dark? Is it medium brown? Is it light? Is it really light, like chalky and gray? As you and I know, that's bile insufficiency. We might have to track that back to the liver. There's all these like investigative pieces that you would look at. You're looking at, there's this thing called the Bristol stool chart, which you've included on your tool, your digestive health assessment tool, which anybody could Google the Bristol chart. I use it in my groups all the time. And I'm going to tell you something really funny that happened. I love to talk about poop. I'm always bringing it up in my group discussions. And I'm like, guys, we need to just do this. Let's talk about it. I show them the chart, and on the chart, you'll have pictures of poop, and it's like cartoony type pictures of kind of like what constipation looks like in the different levels of constipation, as well as diarrhea and loose stools and what that can look like. But you're always shooting for what is typically referred to as number 4 on the chart, which is like poop that is about 1 inch in diameter. It's medium brown. It's one long piece with no little cracks in it. And I had this guy in my session once. He's like, I've been told my whole life it's called number 2. I'm going to start saying number 4. He's like, I did my number 4 today. And everyone will usually start talking about their poop and like, did you look at it today? And what did you notice? But there's so much fascinating stuff. Like one of my favorite ones, it sounds silly, right? It's my favorite thing. Is like your poop should drop to the bottom of the bowl. If it floats or if it has kind of a sheen on it, that can be an indicator that you're not digesting your fats well. So I don't know. I'd love to hear some of your additional thoughts about what you're looking for and telling people to look for with their poop. We can call it stool if that makes you feel more comfortable, but whatever. Karis and I are both moms of boys, no less. So, call it stool, call it poop, whatever.
I think poop is the more tame term, really.
Probably.
I think, I couldn't have really said it any better. It's really just that you should pay attention. I will never forget. I have mostly female clients, but I have had a few male clients. And, I think I warm them up in the beginning and tell them that we're going to talk about poop. And so I think they think that I'm going to say, well, did you poop today? Or are you pooping or whatever? It gets much more, a lot more questions, right? Mm-hmm. So the Bristol stool chart is amazing. And kudos to, I don't remember her name, but that is from Creighton University, where I went to nursing school. So woohoo! I learned about that in school too.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, I think noticing how often are you going to the bathroom? Because a lot of people are like, I poop 3 times a day, but they don't have the number 4 in the sense that it's a big long log, right? They just have like small chunks, but it's more often. So that would still be seen as something that we need to improve. Really, the way that your biology works for most people, shift workers are a little bit more trouble, or people have very irregular schedules. But like if you're a person that's going to bed at 10 o'clock and getting up at 6 o'clock every morning or whatever, you should be pooping within like an hour of when you wake up. And this is sans coffee. Okay. So like not something stimulating you to go poop. And really, if that's not happening in that long log form that falls to the bottom of the toilet, then there are things that we can do to improve that. So really, that's kind of where I start people with like the baseline. People will say all the time, like, it's normal for me to go once every 3 days. It's normal for me to sit in the bathroom for a half an hour. It's normal for me. I'm like, okay, that might be normal for you right now, but that's not how your body is supposed to work. Yeah. And the thing is like, we've talked about.
Think of all the food you've eaten in 3 days. If you haven't cooked in 3 days, where do you think that food is?
It's in like all throughout your intestine and lining.
I have read that the average American is carrying around 3 to 5 pounds of poop with them on average.
I'm not surprised it's not more. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
If you've ever done a colonoscopy and you see how much actually comes out, you're like, even for someone who poops every day, you're like, holy cow.
Oh my
like,
gosh.
and that cleans you out, right? So there's nothing inside because you're not
Mhm.
eating either.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I think to have an open mind that what's happening for you, what your habits are, may not be optimal for your body. And the reason that we care so much about poop is that the poop is the leftover from everything that went through our GI tract, right? And the thing that needs to get out, but it's also where the body pulls breakdown of all kinds of things, hormones, toxins, anything. If you eat a crappy diet and you have a bunch of chemicals and stuff in your diet, your body cannot do anything with that. And all it wants is to get it out of your body. That goes in your poop. So
Pooping
you
is the number one way
out.
you detox, that as far as
You need to poop
excretion.
out.
Mhm.
And that's why, detox protocols, or when people do detoxes or whatever, a lot of times it leads to a lot of pooping, because for that very reason, it's one of the ways, probably the fundamental way,
Mhm.
peeing,
Mhm.
pooping, sweating,
Mhm. Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
That you get all that stuff out of your body. You don't
Yeah.
want it in there. You don't want it recirculating. You don't want it hanging out. That's not the goal.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always been told that the consistency of the poop, like I said, about 1 inch in diameter, one long piece, but it should be about the consistency of toothpaste.
Mhm.
I've read that a
Yeah.
lot.
And if
So
you've ever done a stool test, people, like that's kind of the next step. We talk about poop, and then if you go to do a stool test and you have to like mix your poop in the little container or whatever, then you know what the consistency of your poop is, because most people aren't reaching into the toilet and grabbing their poop. Hopefully
probably
not.
not. I have done that, but with that's most people
Unfortunately,
probably.
I've been involved with that at work.
Yeah.
We're taking care of people. But what I mean is just that that's kind of a way that you're like, oh, my poop does seem harder than maybe it should be, or whatever.
Or way more like a, soft serve yogurt or something.
Or that.
What would you say are some, we kind of started out talking about just chewing your food, but if you could offer, this is a 2-part question. If you could offer a few, like, here's just a couple things you could literally start today to improve your digestion, what would that be? And the second half of that is, I am curious, like, if you had there's so many things that people are doing, but if you had to narrow it down to the one thing you see the most that people are doing to negatively impact their digestion, I'd be curious about that too. So what are some practical things we can start today? And that can lead you into a conversation too about providing some details about what you have to offer, like specific testing and stuff. If you've already hit that level of like, okay, things really need some extra attention here. And then what's the number one thing you see that's impacting digestion negatively?
Yeah. So I would say what you could do today is, number one, chew your food. We talked about that a little bit before. So the next time you eat, just sit down and do what you would normally do, but try and pay attention. Like, how much am I actually chewing? How long did it take me to sit here? We kind of have a joke in our house. The kids know, I mean, my poor children, they've been their whole lives, they're very aware of all this stuff.
Right.
They're like, oh, you got done first. You didn't chew your food, kind of thing. So, just be aware, like, what are you doing? Are you chewing it 5 times? Okay, let's try and increase that, increase by like maybe 3 bites per time. And then give yourself a week focusing on that and do your best. If you miss one meal, or one meal you're out with somebody and you're not paying attention, doesn't matter. Just start on the next one again, and then see how it's changed for you. Did it make a difference? That's definitely something you can do now. Also, trying to think about that parasympathetic state and what can you do to just focus a little bit on all the great things you were talking about. And also, where did your food come from? Like, I will never forget when my kids were younger and they used to think that everything came from the grocery store. You know, they
Mm,
had no idea that food was grown in the ground or on trees or whatever,
yeah.
you know? And so, you know, where did your food come from? If you prepared it yourself, like you can think about that, have gratitude for the ability that your ability to do that.
Mhm.
What are you eating? I think, you know, the whole food journal thing, people have opinions about that. But I think that if you just look at it as information gathering, and one of the biggest ways that can help you is seeing your digestion or like your energy and mood symptoms
Mhm.
related to your food. So you
Mhm.
won't always get this perfect linear path. Like I ate gluten at lunch and then 3 hours later I have a headache or I'm crabby or whatever. I mean, sure, it could be from lots of different things, but it is very enlightening to like write things down. And I'm not talking about like amounts of food or calories or
Mhm.
anything like that. You literally do not have to keep track of that. It's more about what you ate, when you ate it,
Mhm.
and what happened. Like, what was the result? How did you feel? And you
Mhm.
can start to connect the dots a little bit with certain things. And I've had a lot of people do that. Just I offer that as free advice. And then they come back to me a month later and they're like, you know, I just feel like every time I eat bread, I just have horrible like energy, like no energy or whatever. So that information is just so good to start with. Um, and that's something you can easily do, obviously. Um, I think in the tool I gave you, there is a food journal
Yeah. What
page.
do you call that tool?
So I just call it a food journal. Oh, my digestion tool.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, that is just like a free resource that I put together for people,
Yeah.
just to help them kind of, you know, obviously when people have digestive symptoms, they're like, I need to fix my digestion. But even for people who have other symptoms and they're not quite sure, it kind of helps them pull things together of like why their digestion matters for whatever they're struggling with.
Totally. And what do you specifically call that tool? Like digestive assessment tool or?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's what it's called. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
really great. And I have clients, we call it food mood journal as well.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happens. They just start to pick up on the patterns. And I have so many clients that just like, I'll ask them, have you ever even thought about the way that food impacts you? And so many of them will be like, no. And
Yeah.
they might be in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and they'll literally tell you like, no, I've literally never thought about that. You know, a lot of people do, but there's probably so much more that don't. So it's doing something as simple like, and you don't need our journals. If you don't want to use those, you can just pull out a piece of paper, a notebook paper, and just track a couple days. And I guarantee you'll notice something. I think the one I notice the most is people getting sleepy after lunch.
Yeah.
Usually when they've had too many carbs, processed carbs for lunch. But then, yeah. So like, what's like the number one thing you would say that you're seeing that has the most negative impact? And
Mhm.
maybe you don't have an answer to this, but I was just it was something I was thinking about.
You know, I don't know. I would not know that you can classify this as negative, but it's negative in the sense that it's not going to really get you anywhere. And that's just trying to band-aid. So I see this
Mhm.
all the time, even in a holistic health space. So really what holistic means is looking at the whole picture. So
Mhm.
even though we're focused on digestion, we are looking at the whole body and looking for the connections and all of the symptoms that are happening, right? And looking at the whole person physically, emotionally, um, psychologically, sometimes too, obviously. But trying to use a holistic method to interrupt symptoms. And, you know, I'm in like a couple Facebook groups, and this is just amazes me that there's so many practitioners that are like, you know, like someone will be post and say, you know, I have low symptoms of low progesterone or high estrogen or whatever. And they're like, oh, we'll do this and then this and this. Yeah, sure, that is going to help lower your estrogen or maybe raise your progesterone, but you're not looking at the root cause. And so that's not that it's a bad idea to do that. It's just that you have to also look at the big picture. You know,
Mhm.
it's kind of like taking probiotics. Like I will never forget when my husband came home, probably like 8 or 10 years ago, and was like, I worked with a GI doc, and he said that probiotics don't work. And why is that, right? So there's like a zillion different strains of probiotics. You have no idea what probiotics you need unless you test your microbiome. And not that everybody needs to do that, but people will take probiotics and they won't sit well with them. They won't feel good on them. They don't know like where to start. And they think that that's going to fix all of the rest of it. And it's not. Like, probiotics might help you greatly, but if you have low hydrochloric acid in your stomach, taking probiotics isn't going to do anything.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And you know very well about our process, and we do things in a very systematic way. You can actually, I don't say cause harm, but like you can make the whole process be interrupted by doing things too quickly.
Right.
Like the order. So I think, it's people really, and this is hard because we live in the States, obviously, but really just the Western world is so programmed to think about symptom, solution,
or
so
diagnosis, medication.
Yeah. And so it is really hard to like look at the whole picture and think that your anxiety could be caused by your gut health or your digestive process being broken down, or the food that you're eating. And so, people often don't want to go there because they don't want to address the food they're eating. And that's fine. If that's you, that's fine. But just know that you really have to look at the big picture, in my opinion.
Oh my gosh. That's such a good point too. Yeah, there are, I think I've come across this a lot, is people that don't necessarily want to accept the connection between food making them feel a certain way. And, what I see so much in my practice is the anxiety and the depression and even the insomnia and all of these things, that the way that the food that we're eating and the way that our body is breaking it down and using it, the implications for how that manifests into so many different symptoms, including a ton of mental health symptoms, is just fascinating. And it's why I do this work. I'm like so amazed by the body every day. I'm like, what? The body does that? Like, it's a never ending, topic of discussion that it fascinates me every day. It keeps me going. And I have learned so much just through this last hour with you. And I'm sure that people understand now why you're my go-to digestion person. Like, I feel like I know lots about digestion, but I'm not a digestion expert. And so I'm constantly reaching out to you about, different types of supplements, and here's, give me your assessment of this. And I'm super excited that in my group, Recovery U, if you've heard me talk about that before, Karis is going to join us for some, topical discussions about digestion. So you'll be able to come and hear more of what she has to say on this topic, as well as have access to her when she comes to do those presentations to ask your own personal questions. Her company or her business is called Prime to Nourish, and she offers all of these really specific assessments, protocols, tests. We didn't even really have time to talk about that. We kind of touched on testing for food sensitivities, and there's a test that you offer called the GI map, which is like hands down one of the best tests that you can do to literally map out what is going on in the GI, so that you can put a very targeted protocol together. I think so many people out there feel so frustrated. They're just seeing commercials, or they're doing, maybe their practitioner told them to just take this supplement or that supplement, and they're not getting success, and they're not healing fully, and they're not getting to the root cause. And that's what you can do for somebody. Is you're so skilled and so highly educated. You didn't just go to NTI, you were a nurse, but you also have all this additional training specifically in digestion as well. So you have such an amazing understanding of where do you start? What do you start with? How long is this potentially going to take for this person to be able to heal from these symptoms? not just to heal from the symptoms, but to heal from the symptoms so that they can live a better quality life, right? Like that's really what's at the end of the rainbow for people, is like, you can go to the lake with your family and not have to worry about where you have to map out the bathrooms are and what all of these different things, and packing, specific things so that you don't get sick on your trip. And so the far-reaching implications of how digestion really can affect people, I think, is so crazy. So I want to share with people how they can find you if they want to start working with you. And then I have one final question for you before we wrap up. So your business is called Prime to Nourish. What's the best way for people to reach out to you? And I also want to remind people that I'll share the link that you've provided for us for that digestion assessment tool that people can just start doing on their own. And I mean, I went through it yesterday. It's like such an amazing tool. So you're definitely going to want to grab that. But what's the best way for people to find you, reach out to you? Do you offer free consultations or something like a discovery call?
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. And I didn't say this earlier, but I just cherish our relationship so much too. I mean, from commiserating about mom things to talking, of course, about nutrition, and you are just always my go-to person to ask. So I'm super excited for you and the podcast and your program. And I will say that I am shifting my practice a little bit this year. So I'm still working one-on-one with clients, but my initial starting point for working with people is to go through the digestion fundamentals, because as I said, through this whole hour, it really is the fundamental part of any sort of health situation. So people can do that in a recorded format and just go through those basics and kind of do it independently. Or I will be running groups where I'm doing it kind of in an online with a live format with me interacting. And so watch for that coming up this year. My first group is starting February 6th. I don't know if this will be out then, but that's okay.
How will they get to know should they go to the website? How can they be notified of all that?
Will be on my website. If you're on my email list, you'll get emails about it. So if you go to my website, which is prime to the letters or TO nourish.com. And if you do /contact, you can either schedule a free discovery call with me, or you can email me right on that form if you want to just talk to me, and we can go from there. But I do free calls just to talk to people, kind of like what they're doing, and explain a little bit about what I do and what they have going on, and see if we would be a good fit for each other. And then I work with people one-on-one, like once they've kind of gone through those digestion fundamentals, then they need more help. I work with them one-on-one to really get to more of the root cause of what's going on, because digestion, like kind of restarting digestion and get things going again, is number one, the first thing to do. But a lot of people have other stuff going on too. And so that's why I do the individualized testing and work with people one-on-one, so that we can create an individualized protocol so that they can really meet their needs and goals, and like you said, feel better. In the end.
Awesome. That's going to be so amazing. I can't wait for your stuff to come out. There's nobody better than you to lead people through that journey. So my final question for you, and my goal is to ask this of every guest that I have on the podcast. And it's so fascinating to me to hear people's answers. I didn't ask you to share what your answer is, so I don't know what it is, but what feeds you?
Yeah, so this is kind of a hard question, because I think about the different aspects of my life. But I will say something that I kind of undervalued in my life that I've introduced more in the last 6 months to a year is nature and light. So I know I've shared with you that I haven't notoriously, since my kids have been alive, the best sleepers. I've really struggled with my sleep. And I made a very conscious effort to be out in nature and be outside in the light, which most of the time in Colorado it's sunny, which is awesome. And it has had a profound impact on my focus, my creativity, my thought process, my brain. Just, I feel like it works better.
Your mood, maybe?
Motivated, my mood, definitely. It is just amazing. And again, this is something that people can do very
It's
easily.
free.
If you have any trouble sleeping, you go outside as soon as you either wake up or as soon as it gets light. I'm always awake in the dark because my kids have to get up early. But as soon as the sun starts to pop out, I'm out there. If it's full-blown sunlight, you only need to be out there for like 5 minutes. And what that light is telling your brain is it's a set of your circadian clock. And so when you have trouble sleeping, that's kind of towards the end of your clock, right? You have to reset the beginning. You have to tell your body, this is morning, like this is where we start. And then the nature piece, there's been so much research on this. It's really about decompressing. So I don't feel like I have an incredible amount of stress in my life. Of course, that goes up and down. But even for someone like me, like I just feel so much more grounded and less crabby. Like I haven't been doing any yelling, all of those things. The nature piece is just crazy. And this can be at a park if you don't live anywhere. I happen to live in the foothills, so it's close to true nature, but like it could be a park and be somewhere that's rooftop. Peaceful to you. Sure. Peaceful to you, and where that, you're getting that time. And that really feeds me. I mean, it has been an amazing part of my journey in the last year.
Yay. Thank you so much for sharing that. I love how you framed that too. I love talking about the circadian clock, but I love how you framed, sleep being at the end and you have to reset it in the morning. Thank you so much for being here. I don't know how many times I'm going to rewatch this or re-listen to this, but I know it's going to be a lot because there was so much good information in here. You are just such an amazing human, so special to me as a friend, as a mom of boys, as a nutrition therapist who owns her own business. You are my digestion guru. You have such an amazing spirit about you too, which I've shared with you many times of like how being around you, or when I'm struggling with something and I bring it to you, I just get such a grounding effect from it. So this has just been incredible. So thank you for being here, Kara Sederberg, Prime to Nourish. Please download her digestion assessment tool, visit her website, sign up for her newsletter so that you can be notified about all the amazing things she has coming up this year in 2023. And that's a wrap. Thanks for being here, folks. Thanks, Karis.
Thank you, Kelly. Yeah, you brought us together. I appreciate it.
Nutrition brought us together. All right. Take care.